WC over in Kenya has played host to a select group of East Africa's leading CEOs for second year running. This, of course, to discuss and debate the big issues facing the most respected businesses in the region. Now, this is, as I said, the second CEO's East African debate following last year's in Kampala, Uganda. And to talk us through some of the issues raised is Charles Muchene. He's the country leader at PwC and joins us, of course, live from our studios over in Nairobi. Charles, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Well, East African companies have certainly suffered the perfect storm. We've had the global recession, drought, political instability as well. Let's look at some of the survival tactics businesses have employed to weather the storm and what this says about the reliance or the resilience of business operating in the region.
Yeah, certainly. I'll be happy to share that with you. We carried out a survey of CEOs as part of a regular survey, East Africa's most respected companies survey, which is in its 10th anniversary. But as you say, this is the second time when we have involved CEOs in a debate. And this year, we asked them to tell us how they have survived the hard times. And much more importantly, what is it that they're thinking about the future? We themed the whole debate around rethinking and the future and repositioning the future, in the sense that we now have got a new normal. Things are not the way they were before, and businesses have got to survive the hard times, but at the same time think long term and as to how they thrive into the longer term. So the businesses told us that over the last year it's been pretty difficult. That very many of them have focused pretty much around cost containment. They realized that that's where the quick gains were, and they needed to conserve the resources. A number of them did defer their capital expenditure, and they're now redirecting the resources that they've saved in that area to the more critical areas. They're redirecting them to the areas of risk management as well as talent management. So I think we're going to see a lot more focus in those areas in the years to come.
We know that last year, Charles, amidst the financial crisis, one of the themes to emerge from the debate was the need to strengthen untapped domestic markets and regional, rural markets as well. We've certainly seen more of a focus from business on cross-border activity in terms of trade in various sectors, ranging from tourism right across through to banking. What have you made of the progress we've seen in that regard, specifically in the next year, given that it was such a tumultuous period?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a great theme around competitiveness, and one of the essential ingredients of competitiveness is reach to the market and the routes to market and access to markets. And businesses in the region do recognize that small geographical regions are not viable, that you need larger economic blocks. And over the weekend, as we are celebrating the most respected companies and talking about the big business issues, we were also celebrating the signing of the East African Common Market Protocol, which is great news for the business community. It's a demonstration of the political commitment towards making East Africa one large economic bloc. I think the will is there. I think now over the next few months and next year, we are going to see the ratification of the protocols, and then we'll move on to implementation. And a lot of businesses are positioning themselves to tap the markets, because we realize that the paradigm has shifted. It's moved. The traditional markets of the West are no longer going to be the big markets for tomorrow. The markets for East African businesses are going to be the rest of Africa, as well as Asia and the Middle East. And businesses are now preparing themselves for that changed
Of course, signing this common market protocol has been a welcomed thing. I mean, this especially after East African governments had been challenged to create the right policy framework to attract not only foreign direct investment, but also to facilitate East African trade moving forward. There had been a lot of disagreements, though, in the past over the right to free movement and permanent residence in the region. Fears also that Kenya will dominate the union moving forward. Has that kind of sentiment shifted? Because you said earlier that implementation is now going to be the focus point, and that had been or would be considered quite a big hindrance towards successful implementation of this protocol moving forward.
I believe positions are changing. I think the parties that were resistant to it are getting to realize that it'd be a bit like trying to stop the tide from coming in. I think it's inevitable. You can delay the inevitable, but you cannot stop it from happening. And now we are seeing the parties that were opposing the common market, they were, in particular when it comes to a movement of resources and around intra-East Africa tariffs, softening their positions. And I think that they do recognize that we are much better off as one big unit rather than small competing countries. And for the long term, the common market is the best savior for the East African economies.
What this, of course, brings into the spotlight is infrastructure and constraints in that regard. Analysts have been saying that this could well cripple the efficiency of a common market. This is a plight that is suffered by businesses operating in the region. I mean, Kenya has launched various infrastructure bonds in a bid to actually develop this area. Do you see Kenya in line and meeting 2030 goals?
I think that the 2030 goal is a vision, it's an ambitious vision, and I think it's a very good thing to work towards. Whether we will get there, I think we've got milestones along the way. But if I could just make a comment on that in respect of the survey that we carried out and the debate that we had with the CEOs recognize that infrastructure and energy are the biggest costs of doing business in East Africa and hindrances to progress. And therefore they identify those are the areas that require attention. But the CEOs also did recognize that the governments in the region are doing a lot towards improving infrastructure and also trying to bring down the cost of energy. So the activities that we see around green energy, which is becoming topical, trying to use water and wind a lot more and solar energy, and the work that is taking place around the infrastructure bonds, as you've mentioned, to finance this progress, all are going to go a great way towards achieving that objective and achievement of the 2030 vision. Let's
look at another overarching concern. I mean, political instability, both the lack of consistency at a policy level and the lack of political will to actually fight corruption have always stood in the spotlight. What's the report card on government from the individual East African countries looking like at the moment?
Businesses still continue to be worried about the consistency of policies. It's all part of the political risk that a year ago the CEOs told us they were much more worried about than the economic crisis. And that has continued, but I think we've seen a tapering of that. I think we've got a lot more political stability. Last year we had a few problems in Kenya, but that is now behind us, hopefully. Businesses are looking towards governments engaging the private sector much more, and the private sector is much more interested in becoming a party to the solutions. They recognize that we've got to have collaboration. The we-them kind of attitude has to change, and we're seeing a lot more collaboration. We are seeing a lot more of prime ministers and presidents roundtables whereby the private sector is engaged. And I think we are going to see much more progress in that area. You talked about corruption. Corruption continues to be a major problem. We had a survey released recently by Transparency International, which indicted our countries. And the public has been making outcries about this. And I think it's a question of the business community and the members of the public putting their money where their mouths are, and actually taking positive steps to contribute in whichever way they can towards the eradication of the vice. It takes two to tangle, and it's always very easy to blame governments, but you have to have the private sector as well participating and endorsing corruption for it to thrive. And really, it's up to the business community to rise up to the challenge and say no to it, and engage their members to do the right thing. The ethical guidelines that encourage the right behavior need to be inculcated in our businesses.
Well, Charles, on that note, let's leave it there. Thanks so much for having joined us this afternoon.